So when we say we want to realize the Tathagata's true meaning, Tathagata is thus come one. Tata means thus, gata, come. So the Tathagata, the thus come one, we want to realize that meaning, make it real. We want to make it real. To realize is to make it real in your life. Now, this is not an abstract exercise. We're not at school. We're trying to change the way we live. This is why we're here. A retreat is for the sake of making a shift. Making a shift. It may just be a gentle shift, but you do want to make a shift. That's why it's important to take time and exert effort. You know, it's not time off, it's actually time on. Okay, it's time on. You know, when you're involved in a lot of activities, that's often time off or away from the type of presence that makes you feel most alive. You know, there's always something else to do. It's always future. And you never really get there. A retreat is always present. And you know where you have to go. Like, you know. It's not just because the bell rings. Because the whole point of the retreat is, here you are. What you see is what you get. You know? There's nothing hidden. But it still is difficult. Because we want so much. When it's dull, we want excitement. When it's exciting, we want peace. We always want something else. That's probably not going to stop. So can we actually include in our present moment the wanting of something else? Because a lot of life is fueled and pushed by wanting and desires. So maybe we can include that. Here's something Suzuki Roshi said that I find very helpful. He said, Shikantaza, our zazen, is just to be ourselves. When we do not expect anything, we can be ourselves. That is our way, to live fully in each moment of time. This practice continues forever. Shikantaza, just sitting, our zazen, is just to be ourselves. Just to be ourselves. But who are you anyway? To be yourself. To be yourself. Are you comfortable in your skin? You know, do you feel that sense of at ease? Master Dogen said, Zazen is the Dharma gate of great ease and joy. And those of us who practice hear that comment and say, what? But this is what Suzuki Roshi and Dogen are agreeing upon. It's just to be yourself, meaning when you stop wanting to be something else, even if you're not the best you had in mind, that break in wanting something else is like a sigh of relief. Yeah, I don't actually have to be doing anything else right now. What a relief. I don't actually have to be something else right now. Does that mean in life you won't change and have aspirations and want to make changes and stuff? Of course not. But can you come back to the essential reality of being right now who you are? Can you come back to that? Or are we always on this treadmill of wanting something else? Even if that wanting something else we think is to improve. Yeah, I want to improve, make good changes, want to achieve things, all that. It's not that that's wrong or right. It's just very narrow. Because it misses something really essential. It misses right now. Right now. This right now. And if you really want to find peace, ease, and happiness, it is not going to be found in the future. That is just a basic truth. You will not be happy in the future. I'm really sorry. It's a futile endeavor. You won't be happy in the future. But you won't be sad in the future either. You won't be anything in the future. Because there is no future. Sounds really depressing, eh? But it's true. There's absolutely no future except in your thoughts. So what are we so concerned about? And why don't we start to focus our efforts for change on the present, on how we can transform now, not in a distant future. Enlightenment will not happen in the future. It's now or never. We have to take the present more seriously. As strange as that sounds. Does it mean it's always pleasant? Well, I want to read a short poem by Ryokan, the 19th century wonderful Zen Buddhist wanderer, master, and poet, whose calligraphy are the most famous in Japan. Says, "Sometimes I sit quietly, listening to the sound of falling leaves. Peaceful indeed is the life of a monk, cut off from all worldly matters. Then why do I shed these tears?" It goes to the heart of the matter. I'm so aware that it's all unreal. One by one, the things of the world pass on. But why do I still grieve? Because he's real, that's why. He's real. And to be alive, and maybe even to be enlightened, is to include both the peace and the tears, the grieving, the sadness, right? To include it all. Can it all be held in the care that we want to give the moment, in the metta, right? That metta is like the holding of a mother for a child, a father for a child, when the child is angry, when the child is sick, when the child is laughing, when the child is crying. You hold it the same, with the same, sometimes a little tighter and stronger and sometimes looser, but you're there. So can we have that attitude as well, that attitude of care, of non-judgment, of acceptance. But hey, when you're accepting that the child's crying, at the same time you're hoping that it'll stop crying and feel better. You're not saying, crying is just fine, keep crying. That's not what a parent says. It's like, I'll be with you as long as you cry, and in my mind, I also want you to stop crying and feel better, right? So acceptance doesn't mean, hey, continue, right? Acceptance means this is real. I accept reality. But the reality of today is not the reality of tomorrow, or the reality even in an hour from now, or a minute from now. I accept reality is real right now, and I'll relate to this as right now. I want to relate to a couple of questions. that I found helpful. Because sometimes, you know, when we put our teachings in words, it becomes understood in different ways. So the other day, I was, I'll get to the question, this is leading up to the question. The other day, I was driving the car after I dropped a child off in the carpool, and I was coming back down in the neighborhood, and it was like 8 o'clock in the morning, so full of traffic, and there was, you know, a lineup of people trying to turn on a street, and there was this, you know, kind of taxi behind me who was sort of a little impatient, so he started to honk his horn, and I was like, what do you want? I mean, there's like cars all in front of me, right? Like, there's nowhere I could go. So, you know, my brakes are on, and I stop, and maybe there's something wrong with my car, I don't know. And I stop, the guy's honking, and then he actually gets out of the car, comes over, starts shouting at me, and opens my door. I'm like, oh my God, what's gonna happen? Yeah, I was like in a panic mode, okay? I mean, wasn't the time to practice equanimity. It was like, I don't even know how to lock the door. It was too late because it was open. Afterwards, I would taught myself a few times, okay, lock, unlock, lock, unlock. But it was too late. Door's open and this big guy is like in my face. And he shouts at me, I don't even know what he says. He's like causing me an accident or something. And then he slams the door. And then he opens the back door for some reason, I don't know why. And then he continues back to his car. I'm like, a friend of mine asked, did you call the police? Call the police? I couldn't even think, I don't even know what the number would be at that point. Is it 100? Is it 101? Is it 102? I don't know what it is. I've never called the police before. 911, that's what I would dial. So this guy was like angry, okay, like really angry. I don't even know what he was angry at. That he was stuck in traffic and I was the immediate cause, in his mind, of him being stuck in traffic. You know, I thought I was going to lose a tooth, but and then afterwards, of course, like anger is contagious, like the flu. Okay, if someone sneezes in your face and they're sick, next day you're going to be sick. Okay, if someone's angry in your face, it's very likely you're going to catch that sickness. Okay, and it doesn't take a day; it happens like immediately. Yeah. So yeah, I was like angry, like what the hell, you know? Of course, my body is like shaking with anger and fear and panic and all the negativity. It's like this huge wave that just drenches you. I was amazed. It's a powerful experience, but all negative. Okay? Now it's just a funny story, but then it was like an emergency. All right? And it could have escalated very easily if I were a bigger guy. But I think he felt bad after he opened the door and just saw me. He saw me. And it wasn't worth his while. Okay? It just wasn't worth it. So he left. Like one of the few times I appreciated my size. But I do see very clearly how emotions ignite like kerosene and could lead and cross the line very, very easily and quickly to violence, right? And physical violence, which then will who knows where it will go? Like, who knows then? But definitely to pain and suffering, for sure. Okay, 100%. So it got me thinking about anger and how contagious it is. And in that situation, how destructive it is. And all that background, all that story is to relate to the question I had, which was, well, isn't there a place for anger? Like, all this metta is nice, but, you know, lovey-dovey. But what about anger? Isn't anger sometimes isn't it the real kind of energy for positive change? And someone else asked the same question, asked, you know, doesn't anger motivate, you know, action? Now, isn't it a call to action? Well, in that case, it was a call to action. It was like, escape, you know? And I'm trying to think how, because it's like a fire that is so hard to control and so easy to catch, it seemed to me dangerous to handle. Like, very few experts can probably handle anger without causing damage and, you know, without the fire spreading out of control. I don't know who those experts are. If you're one of them, please share how you manage anger in a real constructive and helpful way. I have yet to see that happen. Aren't there other ways to motivate action that possibly have as much, you know, drive as anger? Anger is very strong, right? But its strength is its weakness, because it can destroy so easily. And it is so hard to manage, so hard to manage. And it's so mixed up with self and ego. It reminds me of, I talked to the abbot once of the San Francisco Zen Center, Blanche Hartman. She's no longer alive. She was an old woman at that time. This was about 20 years ago. She was about 80 then. And I was talking with her, and she gave me this story that, I mean, this is 20 years ago, and then when was that? That was like 98, 99, something like that. Yeah. And she was telling me how she was an anti-war activist in the 50s and 60s. One of the first protesters against the nuclear bomb. I mean, nobody protests a nuclear bomb anymore. What happened to that? We just accepted the bomb. We learned to love the bomb. So she was one of the original protesters back then, saying that this is just nuts. You know, how can you have a weapon that will destroy a city and then have 1,000 of them? Like, how can that be? And all the resources going into it and everything, you know? Craziness, right? That we've all just come to terms with. So they were in these protests, like in Berkeley, okay? Big protests, ban the bomb, right? And lo and behold, she's at the front of this line of this protest. And this is before she was a Buddhist. She's at the front line of the protest, and they're edging towards going down the road. And there's a whole cordon, I mean a whole line of state police with helmets and batons who are coming, and shields coming along at them, right? So these two groups of like hippie or pre-hippie protesters and state police are coming closer together. And she's shouting and shouting and shouting, and everybody's shouting, right? And they get real close. And she finds herself pushed right at the front, right against a policeman, which she realized then was actually a police boy. He was like this 19-year-old kid. Oh, well, sorry if anyone here is 19. But he was like in her mind, a kid. And she just saw in her visors the fear. He was afraid of them. Okay? And that was dangerous. And she was afraid of them. And she was wondering, she asked me, what is he afraid of? What is he afraid of? Right? They have the weapons. What is he afraid of? So she turned around and she looked behind her at all of her cohort, all of her chevre, right? All the protesters. And you know what she saw? A sea of angry faces of people screaming. And she's like, oh my God, that's scary. The anger was so fierce. Everybody was so right. It was scary how right they were. She stopped going to any protest after that. she swore off protest. She said, like, it just... She saw that what they were doing just wasn't going to do anything. It just created the fear and anger on the other side. These two sides were mirroring each other. Ever since then, I was like, when I hear a protest happening, you know, the goal may be right, but is the method going to achieve it? Is the method really going to achieve it? The Buddha taught about skillful means. Upaya, skillful means. What is the best means, the method, to achieve your goal? Okay? Anger may be cathartic. It may make you feel powerful. But is it the most skillful way to make the change you want to make? I don't have an answer for that, but I just think it's a deep question in the context of metta. And when Buddha taught to his son that loving kindness, metta, is the antidote to anger, he didn't continue the sentence and say, unless the anger is for a good reason. Unless you're right. It's like, no, it was, you know, metta, I think he would have suggested that in all cases, metta, in whatever form it is produced, is going to lead to more skillful action than anger will. Even though anger may get everybody energized. What is going to last longer? Okay? When we're talking about long-term practice, what's really going to make a difference? Long-term. Don't think about, you know, making your point with this government or this situation. Think about your whole life of practice and what you want to cultivate in your heart and in your mind. Okay? The changes that anger make, I would suggest, are pretty short term. And they may seem big in that moment, but they're going to boomerang back. The karma you're creating is that anger will lead to anger, and love will lead to love. You know, and the Buddha said this in the Dhammapada. Hate is never conquered by hate. Hate is conquered by love only. And that is a natural law. Okay? That's a universal law, which he called the law of karma. What you produce is what will be produced and returned to you. What do you want to receive? If you produce anger, you're going to receive anger. If you produce hatred, you'll be hated back. You'll be hated back. You know, I was in Detroit recently and went to the Henry Ford Museum. It's this big, big museum of all these like amazing pieces of history that Ford bought. And one of them was this bus from like Alabama, 1953. What is it? It's Rosa Parks' bus. Rosa Parks, I don't know if you know of her, but she was this black woman who would take the bus on Montgomery, Alabama, and at that point it was during segregation where blacks and whites were separate. And blacks and whites had to sit on separate parts of the bus. And if there were more whites coming on, then the blacks had to give up their seats. Okay? I mean, this is after slavery, right? This is, you know, when blacks actually were legislated as equal, but they still were separate. So Rosa Parks was traveling the bus every day, and after a long day of work, and she sat down on the bus, and lo and behold, after a few stops, a white person came on, and the bus driver said to her, you know, get off your seat. And it wasn't just that there weren't any seats, but that the blacks couldn't sit in the same aisle as a white person or behind or above. So there had to be like no white people even around. Like even if there was this free seat over in the next aisle, she couldn't sit in it because the white person was in the same aisle. So it's not that there were no seats, she just like couldn't even be near a white person. And Rosa was tired. And she didn't get up. She just said no. No, she's not getting up. So the bus driver at this point stopped the bus and actually pulled out his gun and threatened her and said, you know, you gotta get up. And she still refused. She just refused. Eventually he called police and they took her off and had her arrested. And that started a whole big civil rights movement. And it really was a catalyst for change. It caused so much change. And then Martin Luther King Jr. then started his whole march from Montgomery, that city. And they did a bus strike that lasted for like 3 years. They struck and no blacks would ride on the buses, right, in support of this. And it caused a change of desegregation, okay, where now blacks and whites couldn't be separate. They had separate drinking fountains, separate washrooms, of course separate schools, separate restaurants, you know, no dogs or blacks allowed in the restaurants. So people asked her, now what is my point of all of this, right? People asked her, well, you know, why did you do this? Were you like, you know, angry? Were you, you know, what did you feel when you were told? And she said, like, why did you do this? Were you like carrying the banner of civil rights? She's just this maid, you know, she wasn't a leader. She said, no, I was just tired. I was just tired. Suzuki Roshi, our zazen, okay, is just to be ourselves. She was just being herself. She wasn't trying to lead the torch of a new movement of civil rights. No, Martin Luther King Jr. did that, right? She was just being herself. You know what? I've had a tiring day. I'm not moving. I disagree with this. I'm just going to stay put. And, you know, she paid an immediate price for that, but long term, it created a revolution. The Dalai Lama is, of course, the other great paragon, great example, and epitome, meaning the highest example of metta. Okay, of metta and karuna, of loving kindness and compassion. Many times he's been asked, why doesn't he take a more confrontational approach with the Chinese? Why doesn't he demand more change now, and why doesn't he make a call to action? And isn't he fed up? And he's even been asked, are you angry at the Chinese? Do you hate the Chinese? You know, they've killed 1.5 million of his people, destroyed 80% of the monasteries, or 90% of the monasteries. 80% of the forests have been cut down. The place is torn up. Demographic change means that 50% of the population in Tibet is now Chinese. Okay, they basically just want to wipe out Tibet through force and demographics. It's a horrible situation and nobody says a word because it's China. And we don't want to not have our inexpensive phones. So, his response was, the Chinese are my brothers. That's his response. Okay. He doesn't see them as the enemy. He sees them as suffering brothers who suffer from their hate. And he knows how contagious hate is and how ineffective it is. How ineffective it is. The worst thing he could do for his situation is to hate and to, try to change by force. Not all the Tibetans agree with his approach, and many people within his, the government of Tibet in exile, disagree, and they say, no, we should have been more, and we should be more active. That's a debate for them to have. But as far as the spiritual leader goes, the Dalai Lama is doing the right thing. And so was Martin Luther King Jr. He didn't hate the whites. Okay. You could say he had many reasons to. Right? It would have been a righteous hatred, a righteous anger. He would have been correct in that. If anyone deserved to hate them, he would have. Skillful means. Is it going to achieve what he wanted to achieve? So we have to ask ourselves deeply, when we consider metta and the power it has, in the end, in the long run, when we think about practicing for the rest of our lives, what is going to have a deeper and more lasting effect? Love or hate? Right? Anger or tolerance? Care or opposition? For our lives and for our minds, there's really no choice. That's not to say that when we're contemplating metta and what it means to wish someone happiness, to wish someone to be free of suffering, to wish someone peace, that it's always about these big things like, may the prisoners be free from their suffering in Tibet, and may, the disadvantaged minorities in this country, be treated equally. May all beings, may men and women finally learn how to, treat each other with real respect. May we really realize the truth of what it means to live together and act accordingly. All of that is really good. But sometimes it's really simple. Sometimes metta, we think that being loving and caring and having a spiritual life is like these big things. One of the main aspects of metta is that it's altruistic, meaning you're not getting anything out of it. You're not getting anything out of it. When I first came to Israel, I was at an ulpan, language school in Jerusalem. It's called Kfar. No, what was it called? Gush, something. No, I forget. What was the name of it? Ulpan. Thanks. Shows you how much I learned. Like nothing. And that was a long time ago. Okay, it was too long to remember. All right. So I was there, and there was a bunch of immigrants there, and we were living there, trying to learn the language a bit, and and I remember I did my laundry, and of course I forgot it. I forgot about the laundry. I came back much later in the day, or even the next day, and lo and behold, my laundry was in this pile of perfectly folded and dried clothing. And I was like, no note, nothing. I have no idea who did that. Some bodhisattva who doesn't even know he or she's a bodhisattva. Right? I wanted to tell her, but I didn't know that either. But that...
How did you know that she doesn't know that she's a bodhisattva?
How do I know? Well, I don't know. Maybe she does know she's a bodhisattva, but I think one of the definitions of bodhisattva is that you don't know that you're a bodhisattva. Because if you do, you start to be proud. You start to be a proud bodhisattva, and then you get demoted so that you're no longer a bodhisattva. See, it's a vicious circle. So there was my laundry, and like here it is, 20 years later, I'm still like, when I think about it, I'm like, wow. That was one of the simplest, smallest, and kindest things. And I'll never know who it was. And he or she did it with no return, just because it was there. I mean, they could have just taken it out of the washer and left it, or just put it in the dryer and left it. But no, it's like a whole, I've never had folded laundry since. It was you?
When I made Aliyah in 1979, I also was in Zion. And we probably hung our laundry in the same spot. But my entire laundry was stolen.
There you go.
Brand new pairs of Levi's, I think. I had literally nothing. Nothing was left.
Okay.
So, contrary.
Yeah. Someone was angry at you.
Bodhimara.
Yeah, Bodhimara. Yeah. So, but the point is that action, still inspires me because it was completely selfless. It was totally selfless. And it wasn't big. It was big because I made it big, but for him or her, it probably was just like, yes, there, I'll do it. Whatever, big deal. Big deal. There's a koan in the collection of koans, of Zen koans. And the koan is, one of the Zen teachers asks, Avalokiteshvara, who's the bodhisattva of compassion, that is considered of having 1,000 eyes and 1,000 arms and hands, so they can see and reach out and hear all the cries of the world, right? So it's just 1,000 is emblematic of like infinite, being able to respond to everybody in the way they need, okay? The master was asked by a student, Avalokiteshvara has all these arms and hands. Like, What are they needed for? Like, what do they do? You know, what is this magic compassion? What is the power of compassion that Avalokiteshvara has? And the master said, well, it's just like waking up in the middle of the night and moving your pillow back under your head. That was the answer. So sometimes it's a huge deal, right? It's a big thing. You know, it's love for the whole people. It's Martin Luther King leading 1 million people on the National Mall and giving a speech that will change history. Yeah. And sometimes it's just that pile of laundry or just moving for yourself. You wake up, I've got to be a bit more comfortable. And you put the pillow back under your head. You know, sometimes it's for you, sometimes it's for one other person, sometimes it's for 1 million, right? And each one is a different hand of the Bodhisattva compassion. And all of them are equal, because it's what's needed in this moment. And you only know what's needed in this moment. You only know what's needed in this moment if you're paying attention to this moment. You pay attention by the power of awareness, of mindfulness.
What if I pay attention and the answer is anger? I can't see how it's possible to make a revolution without anger. Maybe the woman in the bus wasn't angry, was just tired, but all the movement was very angry. And they made a change. And like I told you before, if there wasn't, I don't know, a lot of women angry 100 years ago, I couldn't be sitting here without the permission of my husband or something like that. So I can't ignore the fact that the anger may change, and I still feel it now. Still there.
I wonder. I mean, I hear that, but I wonder what is stronger, anger or love, compassion or cruelty, right? What is stronger? What's a stronger motivation, anger or compassion? I believe compassion is stronger because compassion will still allow us to think clearly. And when you're experiencing strong anger, it's really hard to think clearly. Anger may motivate action and you can do what other people tell you to do, but if you want to make a wise decision, probably compassion will give you better direction. Just try to remember, think of, are you clear when you're angry? Right? Anger is a very strong force, yeah. But is it good for making decisions? Or, or a long-term plan? It may lead from one thing to the next, but when I think about long-term change, it's really acknowledging the suffering that's going on, and caring about that suffering. That's what's going to change laws. Because people are angry, I don't know, but really acknowledging the suffering, if we care about minorities who are being treated pretty badly, right? Until the people who are making laws start to feel their suffering, our anger is not going to move them. What will move people is really empathizing with the suffering of others and caring about it. So I question anger. I mean, I hear the force it has, but I still think the force is dangerous because it's really hard to control. And what is your state of mind when you have anger versus your state of mind when you have compassion. I don't have an answer for that. I have a question. I'm just asking the question for you to look at that. The next time you feel anger, the next time you feel compassion, what is the state of mind? You know, what is the clarity? How clear are you? I'm just asking the question because I don't really know. I mean, there may be a place for a type of anger that maybe should not be called anger. Maybe it should be called something else. Maybe it's something else, and it's not the type of anger that we're talking about here, or that the Buddha's talking about. Maybe it's a different energy, and we have to think, okay, well, what is it? What is that? What is that feeling, that urge? What is that energy? I don't know. Because maybe if it's a strong energy and it's fueled by, deep care, real care, maybe it's not in the same category as anger. I don't know.
Actually, in relation to what you said, I was thinking, for example, Nelson Mandela. At first, I had, in South Africa, violent protests, and it just led to beatings and arrests, and nothing was solved. And then finally, when Mandela actually started, speaking to the other side and negotiating, in an empathetic way, then that's when things started changing.
Yeah. Yeah, South Africa is a really unique example because they also had these committees of reconciliation afterwards, which took a huge amount of, letting go of the anger. Basically, you could have people who killed other people, and as long as they sort of confessed it, they didn't go to prison, right? It's an amazing thing. You had, people who were part of the terrible force that did horrible things, and if you just came up, and admitted it and wanted to start over, it's pretty tremendous, the pain they must have gone through. But that example shows us that if you do go through the pain, maybe there is a change that will happen. But I don't know. For us, I think the question is really very central. And on a retreat, that is a meditation retreat, the question is very much, what is your mind like, and what are you paying attention to? And most importantly, are your thoughts, feelings, and experience right now leading to greater good or greater harm? You want to be really realistic and ask that basic question. Is the state of my mind, are the thoughts I'm having, are my choices and what I'm paying attention to, increasing good, meaning happiness, peace, or increasing some suffering in some way. We want to cease from harm, we want to increase goodness, and we want to be clear, right? Those are the basic guidelines of all choices we make in our lives and in our practice. Okay? If you can keep it simple and clear, you can rest and be yourself more. This is what I'm emphasizing again and again. I'm not here to give answers. I'm here to ask questions with you. And if these questions can motivate us to continue practicing and exploring our lives with sincerity and openness, then we're doing a good job. So I want to end with one short haiku. And one short story. Very short, don't worry. So there was a little girl who was a little artist, and she went to school, and she was in first grade. And she was very artistic and drawing all the time. And on this particular day, when they had free art period, she was just drawing and drawing and drawing and drawing the whole time. Usually she draws, but not like this. She was really involved. And the teacher was quite interested, and at the end of the session, went over and said, what are you drawing? You're so, you've been doing this all session. Like, what are you doing? And she said, oh, I'm drawing God. She went, what? You're drawing God? Really? But nobody's seen God. And without a moment, she just said, well, they will soon. So, what that short little example can help us with is to remind us simply that there are more possibilities often than what we imagine, right? If we allow ourselves to, open, that you can find and create things that have never been found or created before. Just allow that possibility to be the smallest possibility. And maybe your love will do huge things, and maybe it'll do small things, right? But just keep open that it'll do something, and you don't know right now what it will do.